Hi, I'm Lisa from Lori's Country Cottage. Welcome to How Tuesday. Today is the third of a four-part series on calculating the fabric required for backing. Today is all about 60-inch and 70-inch wide backing. Cuddle, Minky, and Fireside come in a 60-inch width, but now we have Quilters, which is very similar to Fireside, that is 70 inches wide. Our downloadable document uses the measurements for 60-inch wide fabric, just for simplicity. Go ahead and make your calculations, changing the numbers to account for your 70-inch wide Quilters. Minky, Cuddle, Fireside, and Quilters are all polyester backings. They do not require washing before you use them, but they do have a nap or a direction to them. That is something to keep in mind if you need to piece your fabric. Some people really need that nap to run up and down. Other people don't care if it runs sideways. It is important, though, when you're piecing, that the nap run the same direction. If you want your nap to run vertically on your quilt, you will always be buying according to the length of your quilt. If your quilt is 54 inches or less, you will buy 1 times the length of your quilt. If it's wider than 54, but smaller than 108, you'll buy 2 lengths of your quilt. If your quilt is wider than 108 inches, you will need to buy 3 times the length of your quilt. If you don't care which way your nap runs, so it's okay if it runs sideways on your quilt, you have more flexibility and you can sometimes save some money and make it less expensive. I'll show you how to do some easy calculations to figure that out. Let me show you how it works. First of all, this piece of fabric represents the 54 usable inches of our 60-inch wide fabric. We lose some of the width with piecing. I've drawn an arrow to indicate the nap. The nap will change depending on the direction that we piece. In our first example, my quilt is less than 54 inches wide, but it's longer than 54. I can't use the width because it's not long enough. I need to buy the length of my quilt. Now, if my quilt is a bit bigger, it's wider than 54 inches, but it's shorter than 108. That's not wide enough. Instead of wasting all this fabric, I'm going to buy 2 widths of my quilt, which is less fabric than 2 lengths. What if our quilt is even bigger? It's less than 108 wide, but it's more than 108 long. I can't get away with 2 widths of fabric anymore. I need to use 2 lengths of fabric, and my nap will be running up and down. What if this is a large wall hanging? I can hardly think of an example that this would pertain to, but if your quilt is wider than 108, but shorter than 108, your 2 lengths don't work. You would buy 2 widths. And if you have a very large quilt, it's wider than 108 and longer than 108, your 2 widths aren't enough fabric to cover your quilt. You either need to buy an extra length or an extra width, and our width is usually less, so 3 times the width of your quilt will give you enough fabric. Now, quite often, with 60 and 70-inch wide fabric, our quilts are just slightly longer or wider than the fabric we purchase. For instance, if this is my quilt and this is 54-inch wide minky, it's almost but not quite big enough, but I have lots of length. Here's a trick. It's called diagonal piecing. Take your 60-inch wide fabric and draw a diagonal line from corner to corner. Then take batting tape and put a length of batting tape along that line. We use the batting tape because these wide backings are stretchy and this will become a biased edge. Now, take your rotary cutter and cut from corner to corner. Then you take your 2 pieces of fabric and shift them. Stitch them back together, and your quilt now fits. There is a complicated formula for figuring out how much fabric you need to buy to do the diagonal piecing. But as a general rule, figure out how much you would normally need, add a half a meter. This will allow you to widen your quilt from 10 to 12 inches. I hope you'll download and take advantage of the document we made to help you figure out how much fabric to buy for your quilt using 60 to 70-inch wide backing. It includes the formula for figuring out how much fabric you need to buy when doing diagonal piecing. This was the 3rd in a series of 4 videos on figuring out how much fabric you need for backing. Join me for video 4, where I talk about wide backs, usually between 108 and 120 inches wide.